Well, I see that our guest has arrived. She is in the crystal sanctum. Let's go ahead and welcome back to the show, Reverend Angie LaRue. How are you, Angie?
Good morning, Steve. I'm doing pretty well. I have a dislocated rib, which has slowed me down.
Oh my gosh.
We don't really think about how much we use parts of our body until they're not working right. Yeah. Who knew we needed a rib so much?
How does a person dislocate their rib? What happened to you?
Oh, just dumb. I accidentally put a piece of trash in the recycling bin, so I leaned over into it to get the trash out. And yeah, bad things happened.
All right. Well, good. Well, you are into intuitive healing, so you're going to figure out how to make yourself healthy again.
Absolutely.
All righty. Well, good. Well, this is your third time we're welcoming you back to the show. So let me go ahead and at least just reread your intro and bio so people know who you generally are, and then we'll get into our conversation. How does that sound?
Fabulous.
All righty. So Reverend Angie LaRue is a certified Master Crystologist and energy practitioner. Here, let me go ahead and put you on the big screen while I read this. There we go. We'll make you the star of the show. So she a certified Master Crystologist and energy practitioner, which to her are modern words for ancient knowledge which has never been lost. Ancient knowledge which has never been lost. We're just rediscovering it. So on December 9th, 2011, Angie had a radical, spontaneous awakening of consciousness that changed everything in her up to that moment portion of her life. For the next 4 years, Angie was on a discovery and learning quest. She traveled the world, read and learned from ancient texts. She discovered what the awakening of consciousness meant to her and what she was supposed to do with her newfound abilities and knowledge. Angie eventually became aligned to spirit and to her higher self. Spirit let Angie know when she had learned enough to stop traveling and practicing and could now settle down and begin to build a service to help others. The last few years, she has been settled in Colorado, creating a variety of different energy healing modalities and gadgets, including a crystal bio bed and Orgone generator. Since that fateful day, December 9th, 2011, Angie has been living as if she didn't have a choice but to follow the path her life was taking. She includes this quote, "By the time you figure out the game, it's too late. You're already a player. By the time you figure out the game, it's too late. You're already a player in the middle of that game." All righty. So Angie LaRue, welcome back to the American Gumption Morning Show for the third time. Thank you for joining us.
It's a delight to be here again with you, Steve. I just adore you.
Well, thank you.
Good morning to everybody out there in American Gumption land. Good morning.
Oh, yeah. Let me change. Let me take Brandon's. Let me put the Reverend Angie LaRue with crystalarays.com/free-gift for a downloadable connection and something that you'll just get a taste of what Angie does. So, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about a taste of what you're doing today. And so anyway, let me kind of tell people this is your third time back, and the first interview. Now there's going to be a little numerology in here. I don't know. Are you like numerology, Angie? We haven't talked about that.
It amuses me. I don't follow it really closely, but it definitely amuses me.
Well, I just noticed. I just was amused by a few things. So we'll see if you can pick up on it. So the first interview was on January 19th, show number 109. And in that show, we talked about, Angie's whole story, the awakening, the 2x4, Godsmack, the December 9th, 2011, how it basically destroyed the life, the calm artist, housewife life that Angie was enjoying. Boom, kapow, demolished, poof. And so anyway, that was we spent the better portion of that show talking about it because it was just like for me, it was so fascinating. And so people are welcome to go back, and that's show number 109 on January 19th. Now, the second interview was Tuesday, and that was Tuesday, February 2nd, but that was show number 119. And then we talked about like kind of your travels for the next 5 years in terms of like what you were doing, where you were going, what you were learning, what, you know, and a lot of it, you were telling stories about like collecting crystals and rocks and you didn't even know why you're doing these sort of things, but you're just like out there going around doing this. And then ultimately you had the showdown with ego, the dark night of the soul, the 40 nights in the desert. And that was really kind of show number 2, except that we did then kind of paint a very broad brush of like what it is you're doing today in terms of the work you're doing. So that was show number 1, show number 2. So today you're an intuitive healer, Crystologist, Reiki, ordained Reverend. But let's get into what you're doing today. How's that sound?
Well, yesterday I actually spent laying the floor in the manufacturing area where I make the orgone generators, and I've moved into a larger space. So I have enough room now to have the manufacturing and two small labs. So a sound lab for recording the solfeggios frequencies, and then a lab where I can I make a variety of other things, carbon 60 oil and colloidal silver, and yeah.
Wow.
So it's interesting what we're going to be talking about today, because that's what I spent yesterday doing, was the finishing touches on moving into a larger manufacturing area.
What had you done for manufacturing previous to this? Were you just sort of doing it out of your living room or out of it right there at the sanctum? What were you doing?
No, I've always had a small area, like a whole room dedicated to it, because there's, shelves that go really high. Oh, I wish I had taken photographs. It'd be fun to show it to you. And they're just full of all these different types of metals, brass, aluminum, bronze, steel, half-alum and tantalum, copper. I have a fortune in copper. Copper's very expensive. It used to be really cheap when I was growing up. And it's the most expensive metal now that I use, and I think titanium is the other one. So about 7 or 8 different types of metals. And then there's all these different stones, which are also all graded depending what they're going to be built into, so they're all measured and cleansed and blessed. And there's a huge amount of work before they even get to go into their slot on the shelf. And then there's these multiple high shelves full of, stacked containers that are all labeled and so it takes a large space. And now I've moved into I'm probably in a space now that's about 500 square feet.
Wow.
Yeah. And so you can actually go from one table and turn around and walk like 3 or 4 steps to the next table.
Wow. So you have an elbow room.
Yeah, there was one point where if 2 of us were working in there, we're like sliding by each other. Excuse me, I don't mean to be touching you. Sorry. But now it's like, all this lovely space. So
of course this is the crystals that you're working with and the orgone generators that you're manufacturing and making, the crystal arrays. Have you, and I know that when you awakened and when you purchased these initial batch of rocks and started playing around with like the energy of these and then figuring out how to put them together, have you been doing this like on your own the whole time, or have you had some different help at various places? And like now today, do you have some people who kind of help you a little bit, or do you do it mostly yourself?
Well, it was interesting because during all that crystal training that I received from Spirit, I kept being shown these small glass-size containers in visions, and I could tell there were metals in the bottoms and crystals in the top, and I could see what the energy was doing, how it was circulating inside and getting cleaned up and then spraying out the top in a fountain, and that would build this big field. And I realized there was a central crystal in the core, and I could basically see how it was built, but I couldn't figure out what does that have to do with anything. But I had this very strong vision, and I knew I was supposed to figure it out, and I had all these crystals I bought. And on the journey, there was somebody that I needed to go see to answer some other questions, and that was somebody in Florida. And so I showed up in Florida, and I never met him before in person, right? And I showed up in Florida, and I was like, this is going to sound crazy, but I have all these crystals, and I'm supposed to build something out of it. And I don't quite understand what that is, but I've been on the internet, and I've learned that it's something that exists, and it's called an orgone generator, right? And I have the basic idea, but somehow it produces a phenomenal amount of energy, and I don't understand how that is. And he said, oh, you're the reason. And I was like, what? He goes, I'll be back. He disappeared out, and he came back in the room with a stack of books and papers, just a big, huge stack of them. And I was like, he goes, 15 years ago, I was told to buy all the copies of every different publication that Wilhelm Reich had ever made. And I've been holding on to them for all these years, wondering why I was told to buy them. And then you just showed up with a whole bunch of crystals. And so he had all of it. And so we read and we read and we studied and we researched. And when we were ready, we started getting the resins, and we began manufacturing the first ones. And at that time, I was still really high on the awakening of consciousness, and my field interrupted all the electronics, and it was just a very strange thing. And so when we got the first run of orgone generators made, and we had initially, we were just going to build a few, but then we ended up having this reunion that was going to be hosted right there at that house of a gaming guild that I had been the leader of. And so we had all these gamers. We were all meeting for the first time. And we decided to make one for everybody. So we made about 20 of them. Well, 20 of them put out a huge amount of orgone energy. And I hadn't thought about it at the time, but we were like 2 hours south of Cape Canaveral. And I never thought that they would be measuring all the energy and the particulates and the everything in the air. Like, that never even occurred to me. Well, apparently, we put out a huge orgone bloom of energy. And we ended up with black helicopters and military vehicles with these big round, I don't know, like if you've ever seen the ships in Pearl Harbor, they have these big round white domes on them, which are these complicated radar systems. We had military vehicles with those on the back of them, circling the house, and helicopters in the sky.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I had psychics from the West Coast calling me, and they were saying, I don't know what you're doing, Angie, but my guides and angels say you need to stop it right now. You are drawing unwanted attention. And I was just, I was so high on the awakening, and I just couldn't. When that orgone bloom happened, I couldn't put two thoughts together, and I knew we had problems. I didn't know how to solve it. And I remember Nat taking a voltometer, and it's got the little red end and the little black end. And he's going through the house and he's measuring the raw energy in the air, and it's like 2 volts, right? And we realized that it was all congealing and making a stream, and it was actually slowly flowing inside the house. And so we tracked it with the voltometer, and we tracked it to a wall in his bedroom. And I was like, Nab, what's on the other side of this wall? And he goes, the main power unit for the house. And I'm like, oh, we're producing so much energy, it's feeding back into the grid. And he's like, yeah. And he's like, yes. And I'm like, what do we do? And in the meantime, we're trying to make it sound like these military vehicles and these helicopters are just normal, right? Because we have a whole reunion full of people there. So I had no idea what to do. We couldn't even get radio waves through anymore. And there was a radio station 2 miles down the road, and the broadcast wasn't reaching in anymore. Like, we just had a huge orgone plume, a dome around us of this really high, beautiful, clean, clear energy. And everybody was just higher than a kite inside of it. And so anyway, one of the gals that was there had a baby, and she'd had a C-section and had had some problems. And she asked me, she said, well, you're a healer now. Can you help me? And I said, yeah, well, let's try and see what happens. And so I did some energy work on her. And when I was done, I grounded her. And when I grounded her, it grounded the whole field. And I remember trying to talk to her and trying to talk to the other ladies that were in the room, and everybody was just mumbling at me. Everybody was deep in psychic space, and they were non-responsive. And I remember going outside the room into the dining room where all the men were at, sitting around the table, and they'd just been laughing and goofing off and carrying on and been really noisy. But when I walked in, they were all just kind of staring off at walls or at the table. Like, whatever I had done, it shifted the field so much. And the power went out. And I was like, Nap. And everything was out. The cell phone went down, cable went down, we lost internet, we lost electricity. And Nap said, what did you do? And I said, I grounded Sonia. And he goes, you grounded the whole field. And so we had all kinds of problems going on. Anyway, we decided we need to get all those orgone generators out of there. So we ended this reunion. Everybody got in their vehicles, jumped on planes, everybody left, and they took their orgone generators with them. Nap managed to manifest a job for us in international waters on a cruise ship. And we were going to be roadies for a whole bunch of bands, and all these bands were doing all these concerts on these cruise ships. So within 18 hours of taking down the power on the east coast of Florida, we were able to jump on a cruise ship and go in international water and get offshore completely, and just hope they got everything all fixed and working again. And we came back 2 weeks later, back to Florida, and everything was up and running again. So, but yeah, that was, talk about a crash course. I learned so much in such a short period of time.
So these rocks, these crystals that you originally collected in their raw form, they all have a little bit of an energy signature. And individually, if someone is tuned in and sensitive to that type of energy, they can feel the energy from these little individual crystals. Do you have a sample of a crystal there? Yes.
We're so on the same page. All right, so this is just a regular quartz crystal. It produces two types of energy, piezo and piezo. So one of them, it's pulling in energy all around it, and it spins it in a slow motion, and it comes out the pointy end. And you can feel a very light stream of energy. And different people feel it in different ways. Some people might feel it as a warmth or a coolness or like a baby's breath, or maybe just a vibration, or, like sparkly or something. But if you drop in, kind of activate your palm a little bit, you can feel it, right? Mm-hmm. So if you put two of these together, you get a circuit. Now, the other type of energy it produces, let me grab one more.
Yep. It was kind of a silly question that I asked Angie. Do you have a crystal handy? Yes, she has maybe 1,000 of them handy. I don't know if it's 1,000, but she certainly has lots of them. And her warehouse has lots more.
I have a small fortune in semi-precious stones. Most women collect them for, jewelry. But I have them in boxes and built into things instead. So, all right. So if we put two crystals together, we've created a circuit. Well, it's kind of one way. It's a stream of energy. But this is becoming a stronger output, this one, because it has this one feeding into it as well, right? Yep. So if I put these in a circle where they're all carefully pointing towards one another, and I get all the ends in the right order, I do have a circuit of continuous energy. Now, the other type of energy that crystals make is a burst energy. If you strike two crystals together, which I'm not going to do, but if you do, and you do it in a dark room, the insides of the crystals will light up as a whole bunch of energy is burst released. Now, I don't use the burst part, but there's a lot of examples out there where that's exactly what we do. We use that little tiny, burst of energy that's released to do something, to ignite fluid or, something else. I work with the stream energy instead. Now, if I take and I wrap a crystal with copper and I get the intervals of it right, and there's a very correct interval if you're wrapping it around that you need to get it, the copper, which is highly conductive, increases the, let's say, RPMs of the energy. Now, the crystal already spins energy slowly through it, but if you wrap copper around it, it increases that rate and the output because the copper is also conductive and pulling in more energy as well. And so right there, you have something, right? And then if you build around that even more, so this inside of it has a much smaller crystal, but that wouldn't work. But it's bigger than my thumb, the crystal that's in there.
Okay.
And it has the copper already wrapped around it. And then the copper comes out here. Now I have this copper really wide so that this has a wide aperture. Okay. Now, if I took it to just a narrow point right here, I would have a single small stream coming out. But for the construction of this is an orgone generator. I want a wider aperture. I want a big stream of energy coming out of that. Now, this has all the different metals in it. These act as antennas, pulling in, different sizes and types of metal pull in different frequencies. And I want to pull in as much as I can of all the electronic smog that I'm living in, because I want to clean it up through that central quartz crystal that's in the middle of it, because that's what crystals do, right? Now, on the top of this orgone generator is a bunch of other crystals. The long white ones you see is selenite. Selenite is 244.5 megahertz. It's the second highest naturally occurring frequency in nature. The highest one is the dew on the petal of roses. Then we have lapis lazuli, which is our darker blue stone. This is connected with evolving consciousness, opening the third eye, things like that. We have amazonite, which is almost a naturally occurring conglomeration, which does the same thing as an orgone generator does in terms of cleaning the environmental frequencies that are in the air, right? And then we have green calcite. Green calcite puts out a lot of energies that help support our internal organs. And then on the top, we have citrine. Citrine is the happy, happy, joy, joy stone. Right? So what I'm doing is I'm gathering a lot of not so good energy, which is full of, cell phones and radio waves and, just all kinds of different frequencies of people's emotions and et cetera, et cetera. I'm pulling them all in. I'm cleaning them up in this through the central crystal that's in the middle. And then I'm choosing what frequencies are going to be output. And so I'm looking at, health for my body, your body, evolution of consciousness, and then happy, happy, joy, joy. And then, the selenite at the second highest frequency is considered a bridge to the fifth dimension. So it's putting out very high frequencies. So, you put these in your home or, in your meditation area. I like them just in my home because they give me a lot of life force energy. It's easier to live. It's easier to be me. It's easier to have more physical energy. It's easier to just stay in a high, happy place or neutral place. And so there's a huge amount of benefits that these have. And I actually have written like a 8-page little pamphlet that comes with it that gives all the benefits of all the different crystals that are inside of it, and then explains the overall effect of it. So yeah, and here's another one.
And this one is a different shape. It's wider and it's not as tall. And my understanding of these Orgone generators is that they send out different like amplitudes or different if you were able to like visualize it, like the plume or the energetic field that is emitted from them is different. So I'm assuming the thinner one is going to have a different energetic field than the wider, not so tall one.
Yeah. This one, this is called the Holy Hand Grenade.
The Holy Hand Grenade. All right.
Honestly, that's what it's called. And it's kind of the workhorse. It's the flagship. This is the one that people most want. It just this size can do a whole room. It'll take it about 48 hours to really get that room cleaned up and then start packing it with energy. So we don't recommend putting this in the bedroom on the first day. Yeah. This is a little bit different recipe. So the stones that you are looking in here at is like amethyst, carnelian, blue tiger's eye, citrine. So that's a slightly different one. This is it's not as powerful. The selection of crystals are not as consciousness altering as this one. By the time in this one you have the lapis lazuli and the selenite and the citrine, that's a different cocktail that's very high frequency. This one is more supportive of just like, this is something you would have in your office, right? This is something you would have in your sanctum, your home, your sanctuary.
And the idea is that it's just creating a calmer, more energetically clean space for you to live your human experience in, whether it's your office or whether it's your meditation room or wherever you have it. And this essentially cleans up the energy of the area and provides this nicer energetic field for you to put yourself into. And it doesn't get plugged in. It never wears out. It just keeps going forever and ever and ever. Is that correct? Yes.
You would have to destroy this whole complex to get it to quit working. So even if you threw it in a landfill, it's going to be cleaning up the energies in the landfill, right? And once this resin sets, it's like a rock. So you couldn't destroy this with your hands. You're going to need, a sledgehammer
that would crush it.
Exactly. Yeah. It's going to take some effort to destroy it. And then any part that's still, yeah.
So, Angie, you are a smart person. You have figured all these things out. I can certainly get my head around one particular crystal and one particular, energetic area that it does. And I can even understand wrapping it with the copper and the whole idea of a magnetic field and creating more, like higher frequency or more motion. I can understand all that. The question I have is, how did you figure out how to put all of that into one glass jar and then pour resin into it to hold it all together? And how did you know that like what you put in there didn't how did you know that it's like sort of going in the right circle? And I mean, this is kind of precision work at the same time. Or is it not precision?
The universe itself tells us how to build, right? If we look at, how the spiral arm of the galaxy that we're in and the Milky Way spins, right, clockwise. If we look at how flowers open up clockwise, the world itself tells us, the best things. And as an artist, I was already familiar with the golden medium and the Fibonacci sequence and these perfect equations that could really kind of take on a life of their own, given the right building blocks, right? So if we study life, if we notice what's happening, it's all there, right? And so part of it was that. Part of it was, remember that phase where Spirit was having me hold all these crystals and study them and meditate with them? Well, crystals were what actually opened the Akashic records to me. And I remember I was being shown early lives in Lemuria, where my whole life was completely centered around crystals. Initially, I was a crystal alkalite who took people who had sojourned up into the mountains, into the crystal caves. I would lead them through the cavern systems to the high priestess, where they would receive, healings and stuff through crystals. And eventually, I become the high priestess, right? And then eventually the caverns get moved off the mountains down into the valleys, and they're building crystal temples. And the temples are set up for the evolution of consciousness and the healing of the body and the relieving of disease, right? And at one point, in one particular life that I saw, I came in a Lemurian surgical theater, and I was just watching. And there was a bed which was made out of these different layers of stones, right? And then maybe there was a little mat on top, but I don't even remember that. I just remember the person laying on a stone slab. There's different types of slabs. Above it was an opening to the sky with more crystals hanging there. And what I could really see was the energetic field and the pulse rate as these crystals put out different types of energies that were tuned to one another and created a pulsing, blooming, radiating effect over which there was a very elderly person. I've only seen skin like this a couple times in my life. It wasn't wrinkly at all. It was drawn very tight. There wasn't that much flesh left on the bones. It was drawn very tight. It was very smooth and very shiny. It was like a finished oiled leather, if you can imagine that, right? Like, we just don't even see people that old and that well preserved at all. We just don't really get to see that. This was someone in the Lemurian culture whom they were extending the life of. It must have been somebody very valuable. I didn't really tap into who the person was, but there was probably about 40 people gathered around that stone slab bed and that person who was receiving this really powerful crystalline treatment. And I remember when I came out of the trance state, I sketched it and I drew it all, because I now had the recipe for a Lemurian surgical theater that basically extended life, right? And I don't know what else it did. Definitely one thing it was doing was plumping up all the cells in the body, just filling them with life force, was one of the things. So I drew that, and that was the basis for the Orgone Generator Crystal Bio Bed, is this ancient recovered technology from Lemuria. Now, I didn't have those big, huge slabs, and I couldn't build it exactly the way they did. And there was one stone I didn't even recognize, one layer of it I didn't even recognize. But I got the general idea.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah.
So the word orgone, when you first mentioned this, like, when we first met, and when I read about, but I was hearing it, and I had done some welding in an earlier, and so I was thinking like argon, but you're saying orgone. What is this word orgone? What does it actually mean, or where does it derive from?
So it derives from Wilhelm Reich, who spent his life discovering and studying it, basically, and building things. The Reich box was one of them.
And he was the guy who had that big pile, the gentleman from Florida who gave the big pile of literature. That was all Wilhelm's writings and studies, correct? Okay.
Yeah, and in fact, the largest government-sanctioned book burning in American history was the burning of Wilhelm Reich's labs. He was basically making free energy, and he was curing cancer right and left. And that was a huge threat. So the FDA took him down. And they forced all of his lab assistants and stuff to burn everything.
Oh.
Yeah. Now, Wilhelm actually knew that was going to happen. And so he put a copy of everything in, let's see if I can get this right, the Harvard Library under lock and key for 50 years. And those manuscripts became available. Now, he was published, and that's why we had all those copies, is he was published. But a lot of his other groundbreaking work was destroyed. His work became available for the first time, and get this, 2012, which was the epicenter of the Great Awakening, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's when that work finally came out. And that's why you're finding orgone generators. That's why there's manufacturers like me, is we're finally able to get that knowledge.
Yeah. Wow. So, my goodness. So there's a million questions, but we don't have time to go through them all. So we're just going to kind of, we're going to put a little bow on this, and we'll just leave this lesson, kind of where it is. So the idea of the crystal shows up, and you collect these things, and this happens during your 4 or 5 years of kind of running around the world learning, and you don't know why you're collecting all these rocks, but you are, and you have them, and somehow energetically, you must be vibing off of them as you pick them up, right? You're just like, oh, I want that one. Oh, I don't want that one. I want that one.
Oh, they were making me drunk back then.
Oh my gosh. So it was like, they were like kind of like magic mushrooms or something like that for you. And just take a minute, and each particular crystal has its own energy signature. Some of them are programmable, some of them are not. What's the difference there?
Mm-hmm. Well, from what I can tell, the difference is light. The ones that are, and I'm just going to give you, this is shungite, this is red calcite, very good for bones, muscles, tendons, and blood. And this is quartz crystal. And from everything I can tell, the more light that passes through a crystal, the more capable it is of taking programming. Okay. Where these solid crystals, the minerals that compose them and make them dark sets the programming. Okay. So they kind of are what they are.
Right.
And there's not much room for programming, and there's not much light that passes through them. So they're pretty solid state. Okay. This is a lot more versatile. A quartz crystal, you can put any programming in it you want. And we do that all the time with electronics, right? All of our electronics are based on a crystal. Right. And so we're using brute force electricity to program it, right? But we can program these psychically. We can program these through intention.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And when we do that, when we work with the crystal instead of kind of forcing it to be something, we get interesting effects when it's consciousness working with consciousness.
Back in Florida, 100 miles or 20 miles south of Cape Canaveral, you're having the party one day with your 20 Orgone generators, and suddenly the black helicopters show up. They obviously had the ability to measure this energy.
Yeah.
The technology exists to be able to measure a quantifiable way, like a scientific experiment. You can measure these things. Do you actually have that kind of instrumentation? And do you do any of that? Or do you just sort of like use your own built-in meter to, to kind of create what you create?
Well, I mean, there are measurable ways. I have some different things that, measure various outputs. So for me, an easy way to do it is set it in front of a Wi-Fi, which is emitting, right? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And then I do have some devices, and I can measure if the Wi-Fi signal can pass through this, which it can't. This eats the Wi-Fi signal, right? But whatever they had in those military trucks and the big white domes and whatever they had in the helicopters, they had something they were pointing down at us that looked a lot like a big, huge telescope. And they had the doors open and they were pointing it down. I don't know what those are. I'd love to get them.
Yeah. So Bettina says it's a very, very interesting topic. Well, that's the understatement of the year, Bettina. Thank you. And Robert has a question. Robert, what combo would you recommend to purge a house or area of dark entities?
So what you're looking at is you want to be in control of the frequency of the house. So there's something there. If you have dark entities in a house, you've got something there that's putting out some very low frequencies, and that's what they like to eat. That's delicious, comfortable for them. So you want to figure out what that is. You've got a black mold problem somewhere. Is there a lot of depressed people in the house? Do you have, maybe some kind of something leaching out of the soil like radon? Is there, what is the history of the land? What had been built on that land before that house was? So you want to try to find out what the base of it is drawing low enough frequency that entities would, become interested. And that could be a person, that could be, depression or alcoholism or something, but some place is your ground zero on that, okay? Because you don't just normally end up with dark entities living in a house, okay? Is there a portal nearby? Is the space-time fabric, is there, I hate to say this, but it's true, is there a quantum computer nearby, So figure out where your ground zero is. You're going to have to eliminate that off the bat. And then you can purge, right? And really anything that's going to bring in high frequencies. So you can bring in, a healer like me or a shaman. You can bring in, selenite and citrine. There's a lot of different ways to increase the frequency. You can also play music that is at 528 hertz, which is the frequency of love, the frequency of rose quartz. Or even higher than that, okay? They don't like those frequencies. It's unpleasant, it's grating, it's like fingernails on the chalkboard to them. So you need to remove your low frequency, and then you need to bring in the high frequencies, and then you should be able to get back in control. So any high frequency stone, so that can be, and I'm talking big chunks and I'm talking gritting. So, rose quartz is probably a good way to go, or selenite. They're both quite high and not that expensive. 4 corners of the house, grit it, connect those together, and create a field of high frequency. And they'll very likely find someplace else to be after that. They may fight you for a little while. They may not want to leave. Things don't like it when their feeding ground goes away and they keep returning for a while. But if you stay on top of it, you should be able to clear that up.
Angie, we've already gone past the top of the hour. This could go on.
Would you like to see the Orgone Generator Crystal Bio Bed before we close the show?
Absolutely, because I am going to come out and see it in person in a couple of weeks. So give people a sample, and then we'll take pictures of it once I get there.
Okay, so the top part here and this much below is all of the metals, all the different antennas. So think of this as a huge antenna right now, and then I'm going to show you the inside.
Okay. So she's opening up. There's some neon lights inside of it just to kind of give an effect so you can see it better. It's basically one big massive resin bed with crystals all embedded, pointed in certain areas, creating different energy loops for the upper part of the body, energy loops for down at the feet and leg portion of the body, different crystal structures, different energies, all circulating around and all embedded in some kind of a big resin, from what I understand. And obviously this thing weighs a few pounds. So that's my basic understanding of it.
Good job, Steve.
Hey, I'm coming out to hang out, and I want to come play. I want to go see this thing.
It has a massive crystalline core of connected circuited crystals with a whole bunch of copper wire that comes off to the other types. There's a number of different types of crystals that are in there, and they're based on what is needed in the body. So, like the ones around the trunk have to do with organs of elimination in the digestive system, and ones around the head have to do with, the brainstem and neural pathways, and it's all kind of laid out based on the needs of the body. But yeah, you got the general idea, and you're gonna get to see it in person. You're gonna get a lay on it.
Do people come? I mean, how does it work? Like a typical, like a client will come and they'll have a specific issue or concern or ailment, and you'll lay them down and you'll work on them in addition to letting the bed do its thing? How does it work?
Yeah, so think of just a power station. It's a power station, right? And then if I build crystal circuits on top of that, they're powered. I mean, they're powered from all the energy around, but they're also powered from the Orgone Generator Crystal Bio Bed, plus the charge in the crystals from having been sunned. So you're pulling together a lot of energy. Nikola Tesla called it radiant energy. Wilhelm Reich calls it orgone energy. Modern physicists, I think, call it 0 point energy, but we're all pointing at the same thing. It's this cosmic energy. So yeah, so it's a power station, really, is what it is. Kind of like a Black & Decker engine that you can then put all kinds of different attachments on and have a paint sprayer or a vacuum cleaner or a saw, or right? That's what this is. This is a power station that then, I can use to assist to heal people. And here in about an hour or so, I have a gentleman coming in with basically tennis elbow. He's torn tendons and ligaments. They're all fractured all around the elbow, which is really easy for me to knit back. And this is going to add a lot of energy into the area to help speed up the healing as well. So whatever I'm doing kind of is psychically mending those tendons, frayed tendons one by one. This gives the energy to amplify that work and speed the healing along with, whatever else I'm going to, bring in for that.
In the case of the gentleman with the tennis elbow, is it going to be like, is he going to go out and play tennis like this afternoon, or is he? No.
Because, if he was 20 or 30 in a few days, maybe, but I would still not recommend that he do that. Things work slower in the 3D than they do in the 5D, and I do my work in the 5D. So it takes a little while for that to apply into the 3D. So literally the vitamins, the minerals, the blood flow, the platelets, the blood cells still need to be getting into that area to actually do their thing. But instead of this going on for months, this will only happen for him for weeks. And I'm going to make him put his arm in a sling and not use it. But don't undo my surgery. Just don't use this arm, and then it'll be fine again. So,
wow. In my case, I have a few little minor tune-up things that might be fun to, to do. Should I keep them a secret and not mention what they are until I show up?
That's a lot more fun.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Well, and then the other thing, do I need to worry about, getting drunk on all of the energy, like the people who were, at the party in Florida, that were kind of spaced out? I mean, or have you learned how to control it a little bit better?
Yeah, I can ground you back down again. I have multiple ways. I learned a lot about grounding. Yeah.
Oh, good. I remember hearing that you have to vent your space. How do you do that? How do you vent the area? Because this energy kind of builds up. How do you vent it?
Yeah, that's a whole story. Probably.
Okay, maybe
but I've got a mountain range right here that I can send it to.
Okay.
I can vent that to the mountains. I used to have the bed connected to a big copper line, which ran to a 15-foot long copper pole, which was driven into the ground. But where I'm at now, I actually can't do that. I'm on the second story of a big building, and it is complicated to drop a physical grounding line. So I have to deal with it in other ways now.
Okay. Well, good. Well, maybe we can, when we visit, we'll we're just going to, as you said, we'll play in the sanctum, and we'll learn and we'll discover. And I think if I'm still able to talk and speak and not overwhelmed by all the energy, we'll probably turn on a show and do a broadcast, and kind of download what what I had gone through and experienced with it. So that would be fun. So that's what we're thinking. And I'm going to go back to I'm going to wrap up the show by going back to the numerology play a little bit. So the first interview was show number 109, and that was on January 19th. The second interview was interview 119, and the date had nothing to do with a numerology. And then today's show is number 139, and it's on March 9th. And today is also 9 months away from your 10-year anniversary of your spiritual 2x4 Godsmack.
Wow. And I'm not sure in numerology what 9 stands for, but with the Palladian codums, whenever we're doing something that has to do with divinity or the divine or source creator, it's always a 9. A 9's always in the codum.
And when am I going to come visit you? Monday, March 29th.
That's right.
So I didn't I just kind of pieced this together as I was I just like to share what show it is. I want to tell people to go back and look at show 119 or 129 or, that sort of thing. And so that's and then I'm seeing all these 9s. And then I realized that it was 9 months until your 10th anniversary of your awakening. And
Steve.
And then March 29th. So anyway, it's just kind of fun. How did you say it was? You didn't say fun. You said it was.
I said remarkable.
You said it's quite remarkable. Anyway, it's just sort of anyway. So that's kind of fun.
It is.
Yeah. All righty. Well, good. Well, I will see you on the 29th of March, in just one day shy of 3 weeks. And so I told people I'm going to get on an airplane next Wednesday, the 17th, and I'm going to fly to California, and then I'm going to go to Southern California, and I'm going to meet with Debbie G and some of the other spirituality going wild people. And then that following weekend, I'll hightail it up towards the Denver, Boulder area, and then we'll get together on that Monday. And then I'm still planning to hang out for another day or two in the Boulder area, and then keep, journeying on from there. So this is going to be a fun thing. And one of the highlights is coming to the Crystal Sanctum in a couple of weeks. So I'm really excited about it. So
Me too. It's going to be so fun to play with you, Steve.
all righty. Well, good. And go to crystalarrays.com and you can get a free gift, or you could just learn more about all this stuff. I mean, it's crazy. Literally when I start getting into this, it blows my mind. And yet I'm crazy enough, along down the path that I'm like, oh no, this makes sense. I'm liking this. This is fun.
Truth resonates, right? There's all kinds of interesting, fascinating, wow, gee whiz things out there, but there's something about truth that gives us chills. We get little goosebumples, or it is clear. It rings like a bell. I don't know. There's something about truth. We know it.
And there's something about untruth, and we know that too.
Right.
There's a lot of untruth also being thrown out there, and that's not resonating.
Not resonating.
All righty. Well, very good. Well, thank you so much. I will see you in just a couple of weeks. This was a fun journey. We have more to talk about, obviously. So
I look forward to it.
All righty. Well, have a great rest of your day. And Robert did say, interesting. Thank you for the explanation. So
I hope it's helpful, Robert.
Yeah, so good. Well, we're grateful that we're able to help some people out and, just have some fun along the way. So thank you so much. And
feel free to contact me through my website, Robert, if you need some technical help on that.
Great.
And thank you, everybody who came into the show today. And I wish you all a beautiful and blessed day.
All righty. We'll see you in a couple weeks here, and I'll see everybody else tomorrow. Let me just let me remove Angie. Just say goodbye to her. So we'll see you next time. See you in a couple weeks in person.
Yay.
All righty. And I'll just let people know that tomorrow we have Penelope Pendragon, a combination of law of attraction meets Dr. Seuss, and she's educating children on the law of attraction. Penelope Pendragon, Christy Holt, Vibionics, her company is actually measuring the vibrational tone of your voice so that she can give an interpretation of where you are on the emotional level. And this is a science-based technology. And just like Angie, Christy stumbled into the person who had the answer without even knowing. And like the person said, you're the reason why I've been holding on to this information. So it's fascinating. And that's it. So, and then we'll see you on Friday too. So tomorrow, Penelope Pendragon, Christy Holt on Thursday. Have a great day, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow.